I am so excited to introduce this one. Rick and I actually used to work together about 1,000,000 years ago. When he was just starting out his career at the Food Network, I was there. We ended up working together, collaborating in various ways over the years. A lot of our experiences at Food Network informed how we approached this conference. You're all very smart. I'll let you figure out what that means. And it's been such an incredible joy to watch him thrive over the years. Rick is a celebrated food personality, author whose debut cookbook, Mi Cocina, Recipes in Rapture from My Kitchen in Mexico, became a New York Times bestseller basically immediately, right? Like first week out the gate, and won a James Beard Foundation Award in the International Cookbook category. He's the host of several video series in the 52 YouTube channel, the Babish Culinary Universe channel. He also co-hosts the Borderline Salty podcast with Carla Lally Music, regular contributor to the New York Times, teaches live weekly cooking classes for the Food Network Kitchen. He has the best Instagram and the best dog of anyone I know. Aww, please join me in welcoming Rick Martínez.
Hi, I am so excited to do this. First of all, I love mole. And I think it's one of those dishes, to me, it's a very magical dish. It's a dish that I didn't grow up with. I was born in Austin, Texas. My parents were born in Austin, Texas. My grandparents are from northern Mexico, but they came to the United States when they were, well, my grandmother was 1 and my grandfather was 5. So we had a very limited connection back to Mexico. And this was also, like, my grandfather came over in 1910. So, you know, like, our understanding of the country and the culture was very dated and very limited. My mother was an amazing cook. She did make a lot of what we thought was Mexican food, only because that's what people said to us, right? In Austin, Texas, in the 1970s and 80s, we were that Mexican family who lived in a predominantly white area. And so I grew up thinking, oh, well, so everything we do is Mexican. We're the poster people for Mexico. And the first time that I actually went into the interior of Mexico, I was like, wait, what? This is nothing like what we ate. The people here don't look anything like we do, like our family. And I remember I called my mom and I was like, wait, I don't understand. Like, what is it that we have been eating all this time? You know, I was 19 years old. I'm like sitting in Guadalajara and I'm like, what is this? Like, this is so good, but it's not what we ate. And I don't think she really understood either. And, you know, we didn't eat moles growing up, although I think some of the sauces that my mother made were very similar to moles and maybe even classified as moles. But once I started researching the food of Mexico, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to write this book, Mi Cocina is as much, or was as much, a way for me to really understand where I came from and the food of Mexico and how I fit into it. And so I bought a car in Mexico City in 2019, and I decided I was going to visit every state in Mexico. I drove, or as of now, I've driven a little over 30,000 miles. I've lived in Mexico now for the last 4 years. And it's been an amazing adventure for me. It's really changed my perspective. Things that I did prior to this, that I think a lot of Mexican Americans do, we point at recipe developers and we say, that's not the way that my grandmother did it. That's not the way that my aunt did it. That's not authentic. I did that, but that's because I had a very limited understanding of what Mexican food is. And I knew that. I knew that I needed to go and explore. I needed to go and find the culture, and that's what I did. And now I don't have a complete or expert understanding of the country and the cuisine, but I have a very good understanding of it. And one of the reasons why I love this dish is because it is so iconic in Mexican cuisine, but also it is such a personal expression of creativity and love and individuality. I think that when a Mexican person creates or makes a mole, it's not because it's easy, it takes a long time, and it's not because they're following necessarily a recipe. They're cooking from the heart. They're cooking from what they feel they want to eat, what they want to serve to their friends and their family. And I also think it connects us all back to tradition. Mole comes from, the word mole comes from the Nahuatl word mole, which is sauce. It is a chili-forward sauce, and it is also a dish that, to me, was sort of like if I can make a mole, I've made it. I've become a Mexican cook. There are many things in the cuisine, in the canon of cuisine, that I can do very well. Mole was probably the most difficult one for me to understand, and I think it's because I put so many parameters on myself. And words like authentic, to me, kind of boxed me in, right? Like it implied to me that there was one way to make a mole negro, or any kind of mole, or any dish for that matter. And so when I drove into Oaxaca the first time, I really thought, okay, I'm going to go find that one definitive version of this dish, and I'm going to understand it, and I'm going to make it. And what I found actually is that every single person that I found that made mole that I could taste or that I could watch make it, made it a different way. There are commonalities, certainly, but the techniques, sometimes the ingredients, were all very, very different. And they were all very, very delicious. And Mexicans celebrate those differences, right? So like if 10 people got into a room and each made mole negro, they would all be completely different. And no one is going to point at that person and say, oh, that's not how you do it. It's just an expression of themselves as a cook, of their personal sazon. And once I understood that, then I felt liberated to actually make this dish the way that I wanted it to taste. There are things like this chile right here. This chile is called chilhuacle. This grows in the state of Oaxaca. I brought these back from Oaxaca so that I could make this dish for this demo. And apart from that, there are nuts, there are seeds, there are other dried chilies. Moles are always a chili-forward sauce. Sometimes they're raw, sometimes a lot of the time they're cooked. Most of the time they're made with dried chilies, but oftentimes there are fresh chilies included as well. And there are, in Mexico, literally tens, if not hundreds of thousands of different variations of mole, from a pink mole in Taxco that is made with beets and white chocolate, to yellow moles in Oaxaca, to mole poblano, to moles in the central part of the country that are made with the seeds and stems from all of the dried chilies. So it's a really, really, to me, it's a really amazing dish that allows people in the country to really express themselves. And so that's what I wanted to do today, is just kind of show you this version of this mole negro is my mole negro. It's an expression of what I enjoy eating. And I love these chiles. And so I definitely wanted to bring these and introduce them to you. They're very hard to find. They're actually very hard for me to find. I live in Mexico, but I have to order them or go to Oaxaca to get them. But anyway, so these are all the chiles that I'm using. And one of the things that I love about this particular dish is that it utilizes so many of the techniques that are like canon in Mexican cuisine. So roasting, frying the sauce, blending or grinding up the sauce, adding chocolate at the end, simmering until it's like really, really thick and emulsified. And so I thought this was a really good way to demonstrate a lot of these techniques. And also I feel like there's some sort of weird magical element to it as well, because we are going to absolutely incinerate these chiles and a lot of the ingredients to get that beautiful black color. And then through a process of soaking and rinsing and boiling, we will remove all of the bitter, acrid flavors from the incinerated chilies, and they will actually start to take on a chili flavor once again, which I've I didn't understand how it worked because this blackening and then reconstituting process exists in the southern part of the country. So there are also dishes in the Yucatan. There's a really amazing dish called relleno negro, and it is very similar. You basically burn these chilies, and so a lot of times what will happen is people will just be outside because it does create sort of a noxious smoke. If you imagine like burning chilies, like the capsaicin actually like will rise up with the smoke, exactly, and it will make you cough. So in the recipe, I actually did call for either having a professional style hood, or what I think is actually the easier solution, what I do at home, is actually just do it on the grill. So you can do this on a charcoal grill or a gas grill, but that way the smoke just goes into the sky and you don't have to worry about it. And they're just roasted on a sheet tray. So the first thing that you want to do, I am using the chilhuacles, pasilla, and guajillo. Again, because these are difficult to find, I've written substitutes for ancho, which are obviously a lot more common. The thing that's actually most important and I think sort of hard for probably most Americans, myself included, the first time I did it, was you really need to let these go. So we want to put these in a 475-degree oven or grill on a sheet tray for about 20 minutes until they are black. And so they literally will look like this at the end. They will almost have like a charcoal-like consistency. They will be very, very crunchy. They will smell like ashes. And if you taste them, they're very, very acrid. And so, of course, you think, well, how is this going to make a delicious sauce? And do I want to actually put this in a pot with all of these other ingredients that I've spent a lot of money on? But the technique that I want to show you, so you basically take these dried chilies and you soak them in water, and you really kind of just need to like zhuzh them up, like go in there and really just sort of massage them in. Once they sit in the water for a bit, they will actually start to reconstitute themselves. You drain this, so a lot of the bitterness, the acridness, all of those flavors are going to be in this liquid. So you drain this, and then you do it again. So you want to do this 3 times. Yeah, or can I just go to the sink and do it? Oh, well, great. Here, I'll do it. Yeah. All right. So easy peasy. We just want to drain. I don't know if you can see this very dark liquid. And then we will do this again. In the Yucatan, so this is an admittedly sort of faster way to do this. I tried, when I developed this recipe, I tried a number of different techniques to try and cut down the time. My frame of reference was the relleno negro in the Yucatan, which I had made with some friends down there. And what they do is they incinerate the chilies, and they drain them, crush them, and then let them sit in water overnight. And then after 24 hours, that it's sort of like making marmalade when you soak the pith and the zest. All of the bitterness comes out, and then what you're left with is actually something that is very flavorful, very fruity, a little bit sweet. So I tried a number of different techniques, different times. What I found is that rinsing them 3 times until the water is relatively clear, and then bringing them to a boil, and then letting them sit for about at least half an hour. But again, overnight is best. Then you're like sure that you're gonna like take out all of that bitterness, and then you can actually start to build the rest of the mole. So, okay. So now these, we'll just keep right there. And then the other component of this, this is another technique that I love, and this is common in so many different soups and stews and guisos, and also salsas. This would be a classic, or the beginnings of a classic salsa tatemada. So in this technique, what I am calling for is a cast iron skillet or a heavy skillet. I line it with foil because when you are charring tomatoes and tomatillos, with the acid and just like high heat, it's very, very difficult to clean the skillet afterwards. And actually, what I find is that this is a really great time to season your cast iron skillet. So if you want to brush a little bit of oil on the bottom of your skillet, put the foil on, and then crank up the heat, you're going to actually season your skillet at the same time. But this is a very, very common technique throughout Mexico. One of the flavors of Mexico that's very common is smoke, fire, wood of certain regions, and it is in itself an ingredient. So cochinita pibil, which is a slow-cooked pork dish from the Yucatan. The traditional way that it's made is it's smoked with a particular, there are two different trees that grow in the Yucatan, and those two trees have a very, very distinct flavor, similar to how we think of oak and hickory, for barbecue in the US. And so that is actually just a very important flavor component to that particular dish. Okay, so these, you want to really get some really beautiful black marks on your veg, because again, this is a mole negro, and so we want all of that like deep caramelized and charred flavor. Okay, and this is a skillet I'm using to toast it. Okay, all right, excellent. And then I have got one of my favorite ingredients in all of Mexico, which is rendered lard. Rendered lard is, so in Mexico, in probably most cities and small towns, there's a central market. It's basically a giant farmer-rancher market. And so every morning, so I live in Mazatlán, which is on the Pacific coast. Every morning, the farmers bring in all of their produce, and then animals that have just been out on the ranch are brought in and are broken down at the market and then sold. And with the pigs, they're used to make carnitas, they're used to make chicharrones, and the chicharrones are cooked down, and the lard that is rendered from the pig is this, and it's sold as basically a cooking oil. And so this is pretty much what is most commonly used in Mexico to cook, to fry. In this case, we're going to be frying nuts and seeds and spices to bring out the flavors. So I'm going to just throw in about a tablespoon or a little bit more. And then I've got some almonds, peanuts. I've got some pepitas, sesame seeds, raisins, cumin, oregano. Okay. Thank you. Actually, the anise is really interesting. I find that I need to be very judicious with the use of anise because it is such a powerful flavor. And initially, I was a little concerned. I didn't want sort of a very anise-forward mole. But what I found was that without it and without the two, it felt like it was missing something. And so I decided to up the anise, and I felt like it actually balanced the flavor. Because the other thing about this is it's a very flavorful dish. There are a lot of, I don't want to say aggressive, but kind of aggressive flavors. I mean, you've got the chilies and the popping seeds and nuts. And because they're charred, you have like all of the smoky flavors as well. And so you can take quite a bit of spice. All right, throwing in my canela. And then these are some of my like absolute favorite things to cook with. These are avocado leaves, which I don't think there's quite that many. Avocado leaves have an almost allspice citrusy type flavor. They're used very commonly in the southern part of the country, especially to make beans. I now always put avocado leaves in my pot of beans when I make them. And they're really, really incredibly delicious. I highly recommend. If you can't find them, again, you can use a little bit of parsley, a little bit of oregano, and a little bit of citrus, and maybe a couple of extra allspice berries in there. Okay. So now this is all done, and this goes into this pot, correct? Okay, cool. So now we're gonna build all of our flavors. So one thing that's also very common in moles in the southern part of the country, because it's a lot more tropical, plantains. And so this is a plantain that we roasted out on the grill. And it imparts like a very, very distinctive tropical note, a little bit of sweetness. It also acts as a thickener because there's also quite a bit of starch in this. So we want to add that as well. And then just get the last bit of water out of this. We will throw in our chilies. Let me see. Okay. And now we want to just continue to fry these a little bit. And we will throw in our vegetables. So we've got garlic, tomatillos, a quarter of a white onion. White onions are most commonly used in Mexico. So it's pretty much all that I use. Occasionally, sometimes I'll use red onions, but I prefer red onions in a raw state or in salsas or pickled. Okay, and then we have some toasted tostadas. These can actually, and in some moles, people actually use animal crackers. In other parts of the country, in Puebla, they use bolillos, which are soft rolls. I'm going to use the tostadas, and then we have some beautiful jellied chicken stock. And now what we want to do is cook this for about 30 minutes, just until everything comes together. We want all of the flavors that we pulled out during the frying process, and then all the flavors of the chiles to come together and sort of meld. And so we'll let that simmer.
Chef, can you say why animal crackers? Is it for the sweetness or?
It's for sweetness and starch. All of these ingredients act as thickeners to the mole, and so you need that. All of these ingredients will give body, but there's some places that animal crackers are they're great.
Crackers are great.
And there are other places that have other types of cookies. A lot of times these cookies are like sort of like animal crackers here. You give them to your kids when they're little. And so there's like a little yellow cookie in some parts of the country. Sometimes those are used. But again, it's really about what you have and what you love. And so, I like the flavor of corn. To me, one of the things about this dish, it is obviously very chili forward. And then by adding that corn, it becomes to me very iconically Mexican. But obviously, if you want a little bit more sweetness, the animal crackers and the cookies or bread tend to give it a little bit looser consistency, whereas there's a little bit more thickening power in the corn. Yeah. Okay. So that's going to simmer, and then this is another one of my favorite techniques. This is frying the mole. So we've taken this, and after, that's the finished one. Okay, so after this simmers for about 30 minutes, then we're gonna basically just puree all of that, and it becomes this. So in Mexican cuisine, this technique of frying sauces, I honestly didn't understand. And I've made so many guisos and moles with people as I was traveling around Mexico, and it is a part of what you do. But in my mind, I couldn't understand, because it's a very violent reaction, right? So you are going to superheat up your pot. You're going to put in a bunch of oil, or in this case, lard, and then you're going to put a liquid in it, right? Guess what happens? It's going to everywhere. So I just couldn't wrap my head scientifically or gastronomically around what was actually happening. And so I did a number of experiments, like, making versions by doing the technique and not doing the technique. And what I found is that it is very necessary. What ends up what happens during this process, thank you, is that my shield? Uh-huh. Yay, it's like you read my mind. What happens is the lard is like smoking hot, right? So when you pour this sauce in, the probably 2 cups of the liquid that hit the pan first, all of those little particles are going to caramelize. You're going to develop a lot of flavor. Now, the remaining part of the sauce is going to cool the pan down, and so those things aren't going to caramelize. But what ends up happening is that you change the protein structure of the sauce, and it holds on and it emulsifies, and so it holds on to all of that oil. And the sauce, from a flavor perspective, you get the caramelly notes. And then you also get a much richer sauce that won't break on you at the end. So now let's see how smoking hot we're going to get it. I'll keep talking for a little bit longer until I see some wisp of smoke. Oh, there we go. I didn't need to talk that long.
Just a heads up. We'll have Q&A in a second. And if you want to add questions to Slido, please feel free. Sorry.
Okay.
All you.
So for this, I always tell people, wear long sleeves, put your apron on, stand back, have a shield. And don't you got to do it. You just be committed and go. Once you start, you just go. So ready? Let's count down. Give me 3, 2, 1.
3, 2, 1.
Okay. See, it's not quite that violent. Although if you do have a white wall like I did in my kitchen, invariably, the back white wall, no, not a good idea in a Mexican kitchen. But yeah, so this just needs to simmer. We're going to reduce it until we get a really nice, thick, creamy, dark consistency, like that. Yes. And again, you also need to stand back here because you will get it splattered on your clothing. That's fine. I think pretty much all my aprons and shirts have mole or some kind of Mexican guiso on them, and I'm totally fine with that. But to me, one of the first times that I ever encountered something this color, I was I was drawn in by the smell because, I mean, I don't know, you probably can't smell it, but it has an almost it's like a Christmassy type smell. The allspice, the clove, the anise, the cinnamon, and then the chilies. And then we're about to add the chocolate. So the chocolate that I'm using, is actually abuelita. This is sort of the grocery store, very common in the US and also in Mexico, Mexican chocolate. You can use dark chocolate, your favorite brand of chocolate. You can actually use cacao as well. You'll need to add a little bit of sugar. If you're going to use cacao or cacao nibs, you want to add it in this area. So when you're cooking your nuts and your seeds, you want to fry it in that stage. The reason why I like this, and I made versions with sort of really, really nice chocolate, and then this, which nothing wrong with this, but it's sweeter. Mexican chocolate typically has sugar and almonds and the cacao and sometimes cinnamon ground into it. And so in Oaxaca, there are basically grinding shops and chocolate shops. And so you literally go in and you just tell them, okay, I would like 1 kilo of cacao, 250 grams of almond, 500 grams of sugar, and a foot of cinnamon. And then they just they dump it in the grinder, they grind it up for you, and they hand you a bag, and that's your chocolate paste. And so that was really where I took the inspiration from, because those little shops are incredible. You walk by and it's the smell of the chocolate and the dark sugar, the piloncillo is intoxicating, at least to me. Okay, so this is looking very good. And so now all I want to do is just melt this. I want to taste also because I want to taste. Oh, it's so good. So I also like this because I don't have to add any additional sugar to the mole, because there's quite a lot of sugar in this chocolate. If I was using a dark chocolate that maybe is a little bit bitter, I would add some piloncillo, which is Mexican brown sugar. It has a lot more of the molasses notes in it, a little bit smokier. If you don't have that, then you can always use dark brown sugar. All right. And I'm plating out of this one, yep? Yeah. Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, so mole can be served with chicken, turkey. Those are probably the most traditional. You can easily make this into a vegetarian dish. You can sub mushroom stock or veg stock for the chicken stock. Obviously, you don't have to use lard. I really like using avocado oil or a nut oil, peanut oil, or another high temperature oil, because you do want something that can take some heat. And then I've got some really nice roasted chicken here. And one thing that I tell people, and I do get a little bit annoyed, occasionally I will go to a Mexican restaurant and order the mole, and it is treated almost like a gravy. And so there's like a little, like a little swoosh of mole here and then a big piece of protein. It's the dish. To me, this is why I ordered it. This is why I've spent, hours making it. And so you want to just celebrate it. Serve the mole to your guests. The protein is just a vehicle to get it in your mouth. Again, and if you were doing the vegetarian version, you can sub roasted veg, roasted mushroom. I love using winter squash. I think winter squash is great when it's roasted and then topped with a beautiful mole. And I just think it's so beautiful. Oh, wow. I'm sorry. I can't talk anymore. I'm just like...
I think we all just need to admire the mole for a second.
Yes.
Let's take a moment, admire the mole.
Yes. And then you want to, let me just get a nice little round of mole. You want to garnish this with a little bit of sesame seed. And that is a mole negro.
We can smell it from here, and it smells amazing. We have time for a couple questions. One of the questions from the audience actually leads into the conversation that you and I were having earlier, which is a question that is, in Jamaica, we add Irish potato to thicken our mole instead of the cracker or tortilla. Is that acceptable in the Mexican culture? Are we being authentic? And I know what the answer is going to be, but let's dig into that question.
Okay. So I think the word authentic, I have a very bad relationship with that word. I actually hate that word.
That's why we do this conference.
Yeah. Because it's funny because I've been having a lot of conversations with people that have been presenting about authenticity, and then listening to the discussions post those presentations, and I don't feel like anybody has a positive experience with that word, right? It prevents people who have done their homework, people who have done their due diligence, feel scared because of that word, because someone is going to accuse them. Some of my most ardent critics, not anymore, I think, mainly because I live in Mexico now, but before I wrote the book, Mexican Americans were the people that were continually pointing at my recipes and in comments saying, that's not the way that we did it. That's not the way that you make that. That's not authentic. And so I feel like that is a lot of times what happens around that word. And what it also did for me is it also created this box that I felt I had to live in. And the way that I sold my book proposal to the publisher was I was going to create this book, and they wanted, this was 2019, so this was pre all of everything that happened in 2020. And so I agreed to write a book that was cookable, modern, Mexican, authentic, but easy, and lower fat, and clean, and this and that. And, and I was like, okay, fine. I will agree to do this to get my foot in the door, and then I will write the book that I want to write. And then everything that happened in 2020 happened. And then I was like, they wanted to put the word authentic on my book, on the cover. This is the most authentic book ever, and blah, 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 whatever. And for them, it is a marketing term. And because so many authors of color are forced to use that word, consumers now look for that word as sort of the badge of, oh, that's the better book, right? And it doesn't matter like whether it's Mexican or Taiwanese or pick a country. It's like if you see authentic, you think that is the best one or the better one. And there is an implication that everything else that doesn't have that word is wrong. And that there's one way to make a thing, right? Because like if my authentic book is sitting next to another Mexican authentic book, well, who's right? Right? So one of them is right, one of them is not right. And to me, that is an American construct. I deliberately talked to as many people in Mexico as I could, and nobody feels constrained by, I don't need to make mole like my grandmother did. I'm going to make it the way I like it, the way that my family likes it, the way that I can afford to make it, the way that or with the things that are in season in my city. And so I just feel like there are certain dishes that are made in certain ways, traditionally, historically. So like in this case, again, the chilhuacle. But apart from that, if you can't eat peanuts, well, obviously don't put peanuts in it. If you really like almonds, great, put a lot of almonds in it. If you hate raisins, use cranberries or some other dried fruit, dried apricots. And I honestly think that authentic should go away. I don't think we really need it. Because I think that, historically, you can say historically, this was made in this way. Or if there is a point of origin for a dish, so chiles en nogada was made when the Mexican general who defeated the Spanish and signed the treaty making Mexico its independent state, the nuns created chiles en nogada to celebrate that general, right? So that is a point in time. That recipe, I think you can say, is historically accurate, even authentic. Do people make it in that way anymore? No. The nuns had time to literally scrape off all the skin off the walnuts before they made the walnut sauce. Who has time to do that? No one. Also, they were green walnuts. Where does one buy green walnuts? If you don't do those things, is your dish inauthentic? So I don't think it's a useful word. I think people need to understand the context, historical, cultural, understand what makes the dish a dish. So in this case, the mole. It is a chili-forward sauce with spices, herbs, and nuts and seeds. And if you live in those parameters, then I think you can call it a mole. I think if you took the chilies out and it became a nut sauce, then it's not a mole. It's a pipián. But I've also seen people in social media that will make a pozole, but then not put the pozole in it. And so then it's literally just chicken in a green sauce. It's like, well, that is disrespectful because, that's like making spaghetti and meatballs, but not putting spaghetti, right? So you can't call it that. But I think in something like this, use chiles and use the ones you like. Use the nuts and seeds you like. And it's authentic to you.
That's beautiful and perfect. And I think we can tell the person who answered the question that your potatoes are 100% okay, yeah? Yeah. Thank you so much, Rick. That was an absolute joy. That looks incredible and delicious. It's an honor having you here. A couple extra housekeeping. Can we get a round of applause for Rick, please?